You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hey everybody, this is Ken Vellante with the Something Rather Than Nothing podcast, and really honored and pleased to welcome writer, musician, poet, Sadie Dupuis. Sadie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you on the show and come in contact with your music and your writing, and read a bunch about a lot of stuff you do sticking up for workers and safety. So I'm deeply intrigued to be able to chat with you. One overlap I saw is over at the University of Massachusetts and the band formation out there in Massachusetts. I'm originally from Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and I went to the University of Massachusetts and studied labor studies. But give a little bit of kind of background over there in Massachusetts and UMass and where you come from.
Yeah, I'm not from Massachusetts, but I lived there on and off for a while. I grew up in New York, and then my mom moved to Connecticut when I was in middle school. And then when I first went to college, I did it in Boston. So I was there for a few years. Really loved the city, but did not so much was not doing so hot in school. So I dropped out for a little bit. Moved a couple places, but eventually back to New York and finished my undergrad there. And then when I finished college, I'd been working through school, various gigs, but I've been doing some freelance writing and some magazine writing. And I spent the maybe year and a half after I finished undergrad attempting to freelance write full time. It was not very compatible with my mental health to be a full-time freelancer. This is also the years like 2010 and 2011. And I'm like, gosh, all the magazine jobs are going away and all the rates per word are getting less and less. I should get out of this immediately. So I applied I'd studied poetry in college ultimately. So I applied to a couple MFA programs, including UMass Amherst, which had amazing faculty of James Tate and Dara Wire and Peter Gizzi, all of whom I got to study with. And they offered me a teaching fellowship that made my tuition free and offered me a salary. So that's kind of how I was like, oh, I can have a more stable life if I teach writing at a college than trying to freelance. So ironically, I've had to return to some of that freelance work since the pandemic, and gosh, it pays even less than it did 12 years ago. But that's sort of how I wound up at UMass. And I had been in bands since I was a little kid and had a band in New York. And then when I moved up there, I put some solo stuff up on Bandcamp, basically as a bid to make local friends. I had a lot of friends in the Boston music scene, but the Western Mass one was kind of its own. There's cross-pollination, but it was kind of its own thing.
Yeah.
And that's how I started doing Speedy Ortiz, just as sort of a bid to make friends, having moved to a new city. And I loved being at UMass and getting to teach there, and got to visit for the Juniper Festival a couple months ago, which was really cool.
No, I'm glad to hear that, and just the reasoning behind putting the band and thinking about music, just to meet some folks and connect, right? Like that's kind of some of the basis for it.
I mean, unfortunately, that's still how I approach a lot of art projects. I'm very community and socially minded to the detriment of the bottom line often.
Yeah. Recognizing that sometimes the labor wages are being redirected to somebody else's pocket. What about so one of the things on the show that I've come in contact with is like, I do union work and labor organizing for quite some time, and then as I've started to develop like art or an artistic side, learning lessons about organizing or arts within organizing, not necessarily like an either or, right? Like that organizing an art, being embedded. How do you view your work, like working with people and organizing, in its connection to the art that you create?
Yeah. I'll say that not explicitly organizing work, but advocacy work has been pretty cooked into my relationship with playing music since I was young. I made a hopefully long lost to the internet album when I was in high school, and wound up giving the money to supplies for families who'd been displaced by Katrina. So that this was like from the very first album I did, I was always kind of, how can I use it to do something else also? And we've kind of maintained incorporation of projects like that into Speedy Ortiz from the outset. We were pretty early on doing Bandcamp only release, and all the money will go to this food bank, or go to this street medic team, or different things like that. And on tour as well, we've for a long time put out a tip jar, and all of the tips for that tour will go to a specific cause or organization. We did one for Islamic Relief Fund a few years ago. We did a whole tour where we, apart from a salary, we paid ourselves weekly. All the profit went to Girls Rock Camp Foundation. And we were able to have like camper bands come play with us. So I wouldn't say that is necessarily organizing, other than organizing a donation to a place. The first, let's see, we also, starting around 2018 or 2019, started to have different, we've always had different groups come table at our shows when the group is interested, or there's volunteers who are down to be there. But we started to more conscientiously work with harm reduction groups so that we could distribute Narcan or test strips or other harm reduction materials at our show. And that's just from that kind of sprung out of the personal grief of having lost friends to overdose, and wanting to make sure that live music could begin to incorporate the things that save people who use drugs lives, just like essential medical supplies that shouldn't be controversial, and need to be normalized in a live music space. Need to be normalized in every space, because people use drugs in all kinds of spaces, but that's the one where I work. So became important to us to have that as part of our show. So I would say any of that is organizing, that's advocacy stuff, but I was part of so I have a lot of friends who are much deeper involved in labor and other forms of organizing than I am. And one of those friends is Michael DeForge, who's an artist I've collaborated with a lot, one of my best friends. And he was involved in a group, and still is, I think, called Cartoonists Against Amazon. And they were basically trying to keep Amazon out of independent cartooning festivals and other events like that. For so many millions of reasons to not work with Amazon and to not have your work associated with Amazon. And so talking to him about that project, and feeling very angry and frustrated at the awful things I would see constantly from Amazon, and also seeing musicians making Amazon created music videos all the time. There was like this period of time where Amazon would just give you a boatload of money to make a music video, which, like, great to get a boatload of money, but the Amazon money is particularly blood tinted. So a bunch of musicians that I know who are similarly outraged by Amazon's practices, and in particular their contracts with ICE and with Customs and Border Patrol, and the way that their technology was being used to power deportations and other forms of violent, often deadly policing, signed a thing pledging not to make new exclusive content with Amazon. And then a number of us escalated that a step further and took our catalogs down from Amazon. So that was kind of my first experience in, hey, I have this idea that would hopefully make our workplaces less like accidentally violent. None of us want our music to be powering these awful things. Can we do something? So that wound up pretty successful, and a lot of musicians spoke out against Amazon. And from that, there were a number of musicians on sort of that email thread and part of that campaign and doing various things as part of that campaign. And early in the pandemic, it kind of shifted over to, hey, all the people who worked on this project, what do you think about a musicians union? Many of us are not eligible for the AFM. We're not eligible for SAG-AFTRA. And yet we have absolutely no protections. And there's a million reasons that it would be great to organize and have conversations about how things can change. So that kind of sprung into the United Musicians and Allied Workers, UMA, which is the 501c4, so not technically a union, which is why it's no longer the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers. But yeah.
Wow, I appreciate a lot of what you had to say and talk about, and about the extent of drugs and just safety issues, like you said about around overdose. So I really appreciate you talking about that and
yeah, of course.
sharing
I mean, everybody who's listening, if they don't know someone who's died of overdose, they know someone who knows someone who dies of overdose. This touches every family, every community, every workplace. And the way we can keep our friends with us is to provide the public health resources that the harm reduction advocates and organizers have known work for decades. So obviously it isn't, I don't love that I hate that I've lost friends to overdose, but I do value being able to connect with other people who share in this grief and want to prevent others from going through it. So the only way that happens is by normalizing conversation around drug use and around overdose prevention.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things, sometimes when you talk about safety ideas or safety concerns in general, like human safety, sometimes there can be this kind of flippant attitude or something around, around this. An example I would give is I did an episode on the station fire in Rhode Island. With the 100 folks who were lost in that fire, and the horror behind how it happened, and negligence and fire safety. So one of the things that completely transformed my thinking on it, and just about like thinking about things like space and performers and the space that they're in crowds, and just simply not making assumptions that somebody is doing something or that there is a safety exit or somebody has thought things through, because, there can be some really hazardous situations if things go wrong, which we've seen sometimes. Tell us about Wax 9 Records, and also the journal connected with that. I was fascinated to see that there was a journal connected to the label. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So Wax 9 began as an imprint of Car Park Records, who've released most of Speedy Ortiz's discography, as well as Sad 13. And initially, I floated the idea with the folks at Car Park because I wanted to put out a record by some friends I won't name because we didn't wind up working with them. They stuck with their old label. But the idea kind of came from wanting to help friends put out a record who didn't have a label offer. The name was my mom's pen name when she worked for Punk Magazine. I think it's just such a cool name that, of course, I had to steal it for this. It's in circulation for this. So the first record we actually wound up doing was for Milk Belly, a really great Chicago band that I've loved forever, and they didn't have a label offer on the label. Did I say? I'm trying to say label offer. I'm saying like labor awful. So we did a Milk Belly record, then we started working with Johanna Warren. a formerly Portland-based artist who is kind of nomadic. I don't even know where Johanna lives these days, possibly Wales. A very different sounding artist, just an incredible folk songwriter, finger picker, singer. Milk Belly's like a kind of post-rock, Chicago heavy weirdo, lightning bolt inspired, but very breedersy poppy band. And then the most recent artist we've worked with is Space Moth, who is a Bay Area producer. Amazing synthesis, tape loops. Also, the songs are very catchy and poppy and thoughtful, kind of in the vein of broadcast. So they're three very different, and of course my stuff too. Very different sounding artists, but all people whose work I just really believed in and was excited that Car Park felt the same way and was willing to work on the records. So my role on those is basically just as the A&R, bring them to Car Park, hope that they've been interested in putting it out. In those cases, yes. We don't get to do a ton of stuff because that's a small label and the staff is already working as hard as they can. And then in the so that was kind of like where it started, is just this imprint of Car Park. And I've done a couple releases outside of without Car Park as well, under that same label, including a couple compilations that were for charity alongside Father Daughter Records, who I admire and love so much. And then when the pandemic started and everybody I knew who does any form of writing was getting laid off, and of course every touring musician was laid off by default, I noticed a lot of it always drives me crazy to see poetry websites with very high submission fees and then they don't pay you for your work. And whatever I can say about record label deals, poetry deals are so insane to me as someone familiar with record label contracts. What is considered a very good royalty rate in the world of books, the record label would be canceled if that was a music contract.
Wow.
I don't know why these worlds are so different. This is not to throw shade on any particular publisher, but a pretty standard royalty rate in music is a 50-50 split. It's really not that way. A lot of my friends who publish books have 10% royalties. I have a little more than that. I think I have quote unquote high royalty rates, but it's not anywhere near what is standard for music. So that aside, I just felt resentful of getting a lot of emails when the pandemic started of like, submit your poems for $20 to this online journal and you get absolutely nothing if you have been published. So yeah. I got a friend to kind of reconfigure the Wax9 website so it could be an online journal. We set up a thing so people could choose to donate or to do a submission fee if they wanted, but absolutely not compulsory. Was not being checked against the submissions, obviously. And then the folks we published would get paid for their work. So we had 3 poets and 1 illustrator per issue. It's not really an issue. It's like an online thing where you see 3 things in a row. But that's kind of how it started. And start of the pandemic, boy, we were all working on some manic projects, I think. We were publishing once a week for a while. First few months of the pandemic. Then it became bi-weekly. Then it became monthly. Right now it's on a little bit of a vacation just because I've been so busy with other projects. And I was the sole reader and editor for this. So we got quite a lot of submissions. And of course I would read them all and want to make sure that the things we were picking were the correct fits for one another that month. So it's on a little bit of a break right now and I'm excited to resume it at some point. But that's the story of the Wax9 Poetry Journal. Anger at other online journals that don't compensate people for their work and charge them to submit.
Make sure you check it out. I'll be digging. I'll be digging further into it. Gotta ask you, Sadie. Philosophy and Art podcast. A couple bigger questions. you've been around art, doing art for quite some time. What is art?
Oh my God, these are the questions I'm terrible at. I'm good on micro level, but I zoom out and I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know. I've listened to you talk and I've read some things. I've listened to you talk and read some things. Yes. What is art?
What is art? Anything you want it to be. I think you can make anything you approach artful. There's certain forms of art I engage in. I think I approach them with some similarities, but I've always, I love consuming media. I love being a fan of different kinds of things, and so in response, I've enjoyed making my own things in response to the things I love or the things that other people I know are making. So my mom is a painter. So we grew up doing a lot of visual art together. My dad played piano a little bit, so I grew up playing with him, and then doing other kinds of music really my whole childhood. So there's always been this backdrop of working on little projects and the excitement over starting those or finishing them or putting them out, having them be in conversation with my friends' things or the bigger picture things that I'm inspired by. So what is art? Compulsion to make a little thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it scales big and you didn't expect it, but that's cool too.
That's cool too. I really enjoy that. I got your poetry collection, Cry Perfume, and purchased it at Powell's Books, and was just wondering. I mean, obviously, seeing things you've written and lyrics and such. The lyricism, and you mentioned you studied poetry.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like for you to put this volume out, collect it as such as your poetry volume?
Yeah, so the first book I published is called Mouth Guard, and that book is basically my UMass MFA thesis with some amount of editing, but most of that editing happened while I was in that graduate program. So this is the first book I've written that was just written to be a book, not as part of courses, not as part of a schedule, not as part of this sort of tight-knit but somewhat artificial community of writers. So it feels very different to me because I was writing towards a project, which is my preferred way of writing. With Mouth Guard, I was writing towards that semester's workshop or, the particular writer I was enjoying that month. And it was over not really a longer period of time, just more concentrated. So a lot more revisions, a lot more gearing something towards the reading I knew I had to do that week or the whatever kind of thing like that. This one was written towards a project, but not with all of this audience along the way. I wasn't Cry Perfume. I wasn't writing to show something to a professor that week. I wasn't writing to show something to my workshop peers that week. I wasn't writing to do a reading that week. I was writing when I could on the road towards this project. And the difference in my age, I guess, is a big factor. I mean, I finished Mouth Guard. I guess I started that program when I was 23, and I was not by any stretch a professional musician. I'd always played in bands since I was a little kid. I was self-conscious when I entered the program about being like a music poet, so I kind of tried to keep it out. And it was only when I finished the program that I was in the position where I could even try to do music as a full-time thing. So I didn't have awareness of a lot of the labor concerns that UMA has been discussing and working on. I didn't have awareness of all of the ways that music work, as gratifying as it can be, can also just be incredibly unhealthy for the artists who are engaging in it. I didn't have an understanding of the intersections between tech and art and how artists can be so frequently exploited at the hands of text bottom line. So those all kind of went into this book in a way that they wouldn't have been able to be part of the first book because I just didn't know. I was someone in a band who was like grateful for I'm still grateful for every show. That's not to say I'm not, but I didn't have an understanding of the inner workings when I did the first book.
Yeah, I one of my first episodes I had done was with the poet Bongkang Tuan, who I met at the University of Massachusetts. He teaches at Union College, very influential on me, and it was one of the first episodes that I did. It might have been my first poet that I had on, which
Cool.
was it was wonderful, and I've loved going into poetry and having those types of conversations. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, one things I wanted to mention that I just dropped a note on, it had to do with the father-daughter records. And my gosh, I ran into a few bands on that label. I listened to Whitney Ballin on that label. Just really incredible. And I was surprised to hear you say it. I had congregated around that label. So really amazing stuff coming out there as well.
A funny story about Father-Daughter Records is that Jesse, who runs the label, and I have been in touch for like 10 years for various things, but we worked together with Wax 9 and Father-Daughter on co-releasing a tribute to Adam Schlesinger after he passed, and it was a fundraiser for Music Care's health fund for musicians impacted by COVID. Adam Schlesinger passed away from COVID early on in the pandemic, which was very tragic. We were able to get a lot of his friends and fans to contribute covers to this compilation. And I think it charted fairly. I can't remember the numbers now because I'm terrible at that all the time. But I think it sold well enough that we were able to make a sizable donation in his name. We were able to work with his estate to get, pictures and things like that together so that fans of his amazing music could just be a part of this like celebration of his life. It was really a cool project, and Jesse and I got close working on it. And now Jesse's my manager. And
my goodness.
So yeah, sometimes it all works out.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
I've had some bad managers, and Jesse is not one.
Let's talk
buy
about
all the Father-Daughter Records things so that
oh my goodness,
the lack of income being generated by Speedy Ortiz doesn't matter.
No, I really got into this album, and it was I think she's wonderful, Whitney Ballin. It was You're a Shooting Star, I'm a Sinking Ship.
Cool.
And very Pacific Northwest. Feels a little bit like Twin Peaks. There's a vibe about it. I just adore. So I wanted to mention to the listeners just quickly. I'm not sure if this annoys you that you were on the New Yorker, that an illustration was on of you was on in the New Yorker, but
why would that annoy me? That was so cool.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know you, but sometimes oh, I'm glad you said it's so cool because I would think it's so cool too. But sometimes people are like,
who would be annoyed that they got illustrated for the cover of the New Yorker?
I don't. Well, maybe
Not
it's the
someone
people
I
hang.
wanna hang out
Maybe it's the
with.
people I hang. Right? Maybe I got some sort of fundamental problem that we can't get. We can't get into
unless the New Yorker was on strike and it ran.
Yeah, right. It was at the wrong time.
Then
it was
I'd
at
be
the
pretty
wrong
upset.
time. Yeah. You didn't control the scheduled release, and they released it your week when they were walking.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, they certainly do things like that.
Oh gosh,
Publications sure do.
There is a playbook. There is a playbook. So everybody, Sadie Dupuis was on the cover of New Yorker, and there was this article called "How Did Sadie Dupuis End Up on the Cover of the New Yorker?" And one of the things I discovered in going to that was through Nicole Rifkin is the illustrator who had done that, and that you had a connection. I believe she's a neighbor of yours. And
not a neighbor, just a buddy and mutual appreciator.
buddy and a mutual appreciator. But the strange thing regarding the podcast is I had an illustrator, Chloe Nicholas, and I love her stuff, based in Baltimore. And she was so great. I said, I'd like you to co-host an episode. I said, can you pick some like cool illustrators? And she picked Nicole. So I hoping very soon we have Nicole Rifkin on something rather than nothing, as well. But okay, you're on the New Yorker. Like, what the heck was that experience like?
Yeah. Nicole, I don't even know how we know each other. I think basically Nicole has been in the orbit of a lot of Exploding in Sound bands, which is a New York-based label that we did our first EP with. It was their first vinyl pressing, was the Sports EP by Speedy Ortiz. Great label. I love so many bands on that label, as do many people, and Nicole is one of them. And Nicole started illustrating a lot of posters and record covers and things like that for the bands that I know and love. So I think we just became friends through that, through it, finding out that Nicole liked my band's music, and she'd illustrated me or the band a couple times just like for fun and posted it. And they're always like sometimes when someone illustrates you, it's pretty hit or miss. I've had some atrocious ones where I'm like, oh God, this is what the body dysmorphia through illustration.
It's an interpretation of me. It's an interpretation.
But Nicole's are always like incredibly gorgeous, and their sense of color and style is just incredible. So we just have been friends through, I admire their work and vice versa. So Nicole was like, can you model for something I'm doing? And sent like a reference picture. And I in this room, I lay down on the ground and put my phone tripod up and tried to get some pictures. And that was basically it. And I only knew pretty close to when it published that it was, I don't even think I knew it was for the New Yorker, that's what it would be, and that it'd be the cover. And Nicole definitely threw all these different little Easter eggs in that I didn't know about. The books I'm reading are all things that I love. Imogen Binney and Dan Ozzie are in there. And I think the thing I'm holding is supposed to be like a physical version of Wax 9, which doesn't exist, but it should.
Wow.
And my dog is illustrated on the back of it. And if you like go deep into Nicole like loves doing little Easter eggs. It's very cool as someone who likes to spot them. But a bunch of former Brooklyn DIY spaces are sort of in the fine text. So yeah, that was cool.
Great. It was a great cover. You look great. Great illustration. Jaw dropping Nicole's stuff. I first saw jaw dropping. So yeah, really, really love that, Nicole Rifkin, and congratulations. When you mentioned some of the details that were in there, or seeing it for the first time, and as how it was presented and stuff, this sounds so fascinating to be able to have that experience of being like, oh my gosh, take a look at that. And I'm glad for you. That's awesome.
What's funny, there was I'm forgetting who wrote this now, and I feel terrible. There's a Pitchfork article after the cover came out, and the headline is basically like, how did Sadie Dupuis end up on the cover of the New Yorker? And then it's both Nicole and I are interviewed basically saying exactly what I just said to you, which is that we admire each other's work and became friends through that. And someone sent me that someone made like a Reddit thread where they posted this article and was like, this article doesn't need to exist. They're just friends. It's like, yeah, fair enough.
Oh, you got some quotes
Mystery
in there.
Solved.
You got some good quotes, right?
No, it was a cool article. I thought it was, I think the point of it was like, how do musicians and artists know one another and inspire one another? But yeah, the
and I thought the points were in there about music, illustration, as they just kind of like made you think of some of that crossover.
Yeah, there's so much crossover.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I wanted to chat with you, Sadie, about Speedy Ortiz and release coming out on your label. Tell us about that album. What's going on with that?
What's going on with it?
Yeah.
It's the first album I've made in the pandemic. Let's see. We recorded it in March of last year. and I had done all the writing and pre-production for it in the somewhere between the summer and the winter before that. None of us had really traveled or much less been on a flight until we went out to Joshua Tree to record it. We worked at Rancho de la Luna, which is a studio I've long appreciated for a ton of things that were recorded there. Mark Lanigan is one huge one. His records mean so much to me, and some of my favorite sounds were done at Rancho. The Desert Sessions, which have brought together so many musicians I admire, like PJ Harvey and Carl
Oh my gosh.
Azar and Billy Gibbons. You could just go on and on naming people who've done it. And that's all done at Rancho de la Luna, which is this really cool house that's been converted to a studio. And David Ketching, who runs the studio, is just an incredible and inspiring and kind person. It was such a treat to get to hang out with him and have him, they've got, I think we used 100 guitars. I counted it up recently. It might be that we used 50 different guitars, like 300 pedals and 100 amps or something. Maybe I'm reversing guitars and amps, but we used everything there. And David's so knowledgeable about all his gear, and it's so lovingly curated. So that was really inspiring. And then we brought Sarah Tudson, one of our best friends, to come co-produce with us. Her band Illuminati Hotties is one of my favorites, and she's just a wonderful person and so fun to work with, other than we bring out each other's worst workaholic tendencies, which is, give or take.
You need some of that, right?
And yeah, just to have been basically not having gone anywhere for a year and a half in the pandemic. Maybe it was almost 2 years at that. 2022. Yeah, I guess it had been close to 2 years at the point that we went out to Joshua Tree. It was just so great to get to spend that time with my bandmates and to be in this beautiful, different environment and step outside of the studio for a breath of fresh air, and you're just in the amazing desert. So that was just wonderful. And in terms of the subject matter and the direction of it, one of the 400 million random jobs I do, I interview artists for publications and also to write their bios and their press releases. And it's doing that latter kind of interview that you wind up hearing a lot of stories that are off the record, but make you think about how the person approached the art. And it feels like a common thread of folks who were writing in the pandemic and folks who tour is just the relentlessness of touring helps you to not dwell on or process old trauma. So things that were traumas that are, 20, 30, 40 years old were coming up for people when they were forced to be at home. And I'm sure this is true of everybody, not just musicians. We had a lot of time to reflect, which can be scary and upsetting, but in my case was really necessary. And I was not an exception to that. I was thinking about childhood trauma and childhood abuse that I'd never written about, really discussed with anyone in decades. And that worked its way into some of the material for the first time. So it was really scary. But I was so grateful to have my friends between the band and Sarah and David to get to write through and perform some of this stuff for the first time. So that was certainly a factor. And then there's also plenty of my, what I have been joking is my Holden Caulfield bullshit.
Tell me about that. You got my attention even more. Phony. Yeah.
So there's, the lead single of the song is called Scabs. It's about people who were antagonizing a postal worker at the postal office. And this was in the middle of a time when the budget cuts and changes of hours and all kinds of things were being widely opposed by various the mail carriers unions. And I'm like, how do you not know this? And you're going to make this person's life difficult when in the next breath you're thanking essential workers. So witnessing that and just thinking about times I've seen folks happy to pretend like they support workers until they're personally inconvenienced made me think of times when, for instance, working on that Amazon campaign I described, there were plenty of musicians who were just giving us shit for what? Like, you're going to argue that it's great that people die at an Amazon warehouse and then are just on the floor for hours? Like, why are you shilling for Amazon? So that those kind of became combined in my mind. The way that people are happy to support workers until it would be inconvenient for them not to cross a picket line, and then they'll go for it.
Born to Scabs, all obsessed, boogie in for big commission. Yes, in your backyard you take handshake squeezes to extremes. Nihilistic greeting to a fly trap hungry for a fist. Don't talk to me, don't talk. Who do you wanna prove you're a big dog to? You turn the screw, but you're using the wrong size tool. Don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me. If we're addicts, then my micromanage every conviction. Breaks are out 2 feet below, floor and plate and snow. Storm atop a broken umbrella, plans of the universe are not clear to you. Don't talk. Who do you wanna prove you're a big dog to? You turn the screw, but you're using the wrong size tool. Don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk. Keep the lines moving, we're all supposing you'll shoot your shot in space. No ostentation, help me, help make sense of revenge in my veins. Revenge in my veins. Taunting me with common slop, monosyllables exhaust, so don't talk, don't talk. Don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me.
So there's a couple things like that. More so pertaining to the music industry because that's where I work. But yeah, so those are kind of the themes of the record.
I think it's always interesting. You kind of talk about different type of jobs, but I know when you're talking about the idea, unions and musicians or workers, we think about professional workers as type of workers, not historically, and unionized, and just seeing how.
I mean, by design, the laws have prevented us from doing so.
I've talked to comic book artists. I'm a huge comic book fan.
Yeah.
And, they've talked to me. They find out, hey, oh, you're a labor guy. And then you have the type of conversation, and it can be harrowing. Some of the things you talk about of rates
Sure.
and what people do and what's done for free and what's expected for free. And it's a lot of labor, unpaid or not paid enough.
Yep.
This might be related to what I was just talking about, but the name of the show and the question I have is, why is there something rather than nothing?
Because I compulsively work on my little projects. What do you mean? What else would I do with my waking hours?
Making something with your time, right?
Yeah.
I think I've had that answer a couple times recently. It's in the doing. It's in the making of. It's in the making of things. It's in that happening. About the record, September 1st, 2023 release
That's
date. I
correct.
understand. That's
Yep.
wonderful.
We
And
tried to time everything to be so Rabbit Rabbit is a superstitious thing that I say on the first of every month, and I have since I was a little kid. Just to say it first thing when you wake up for good luck. And so I, at some point, maybe like 2017, I started to tweet it once a month, and I quote tweet myself every time. So people are always like, I get a reply on the first one from 2017, and someone's like, "Wow, I can't believe I scrolled all the way back." And when we decided to name the record this, I started working on writing on July. I assemble little bits and pieces, but I started working on writing in earnest on July 1st, 2020. No, it has to have been the year before, 2021. And so I just put it in a document. I typed Rabbit Rabbit up top, not expecting that to be the name of the record, but I was just like, haha, I'm starting on the 1st. And a few months later, my bandmate Andy was like, you know what, we should call the record Rabbit Rabbit. And I was like, yeah, it's really funny.
I like it.
Working in this document where I'm keeping meticulous notes of all the things that have gone into working on these songs, what inspired different ones, all the different stages of lyrics, and it's called Rabbit Rabbit. So that's kind of how we landed on the name. Andy just suggesting that it should be, and I was like, it's weirdly already the name of the file. And so now I look like I'm I have the most foresight and marketing genius of any other moment in my life, because I've been saying this.
If it looks
monthly.
like it, you do.
Yeah, it's totally retconned, but yes. Anyway, so the record comes out September 1st. We announced it June 1st. I think the third single comes out August 1st. We couldn't make July 1st happen because I think it's a weekend. But other than that, we're really trying to stick to the theme here.
No, I love that too. And it's a great title, and I love to hear to hear the background to it. So I wanted to mention one other thing with regards to your work, to the listeners, your solo work on Sad 13, and I was wondering with that being a different style in your solo work, just in general, do you end up feeling you have to go to that solo expression at times and more towards working with Speedy Ortiz, or is there something deliberate about it in your creativity and what you're doing?
Yeah, I feel like the answer has changed over the years. When I first wanted to to jump even farther back, when I started doing Speedy Ortiz, it was because I'd been in this band for 5 years, and the drummer was an engineer and a producer. And so even though I'd grown up doing home recording and enjoyed playing all kinds of instruments, I didn't really have that role in my old band. And I wanted an outlet to make some weird stuff at home where I play the drums and I play the bass and I play all the stuff. So that's what Speedy Ortiz started as, just my home recorded lo-fi thing where I play everything. And I've always really enjoyed projects that are like that. One of my, absolute favorites, Elliott Smith, would frequently play everything on a recording and was kind of a big advocate of home recording. So that's what Speedy Ortiz started as, although it probably sounded more like the Lou Barlow solo thing than Elliott Smith thing. But then, that suddenly, I'd been in this other band for 5 years and I'd taken it as seriously as I could to be, playing to 8 people, once in a while. But people liked the weird solo stuff. So the band kind of built around that. And of course, once it's a band, I enjoy playing with everybody, and then we get a little more professional sounding. And then we've done a few records and they all sound quite professional because they are. And then I'm suddenly like, I just did the same thing to myself. Now I don't have the outlet for my weird stuff I make at home or where I get to play everything. So I started doing Sad 13 because I just needed to do something all myself and to have that kind of creative outlet. Because I find when I'm working on stuff alone, I'm not good at jamming. I will never, I won't do it. Put my foot down.
It's in your contract.
I like to be alone in a room for 14 hours and see what crazy improbable ideas happen from that. Not so much in any kind of like jam. So I started doing Sad 13 so I could do stuff like that. And the first record was very bedroom pop influenced because that's just what I could figure out how to play in the tiny bedroom I was subletting. And then doing that made me realize I wanted to be more involved in the production end of things for Speedy too, because it's just a part of the arrangement process is the song to me. I definitely, any little textural thing feels like part of the song to me. It's not what do people call it? Candy. It's not just decorative. It's like part of the arrangement. So the next Speedy record, having learned to produce better with synths and drum machines, we incorporated some more stuff like that. We weren't coming from the same place with those synths and drum machines as I was with Sad 13, but it still was part of it. And then the next Sad 13 record I did, of course, had a little bit more rock stuff to it. I was really enjoying a lot of like British new wave stuff. I was enjoying a lot of like guitar-based pop music from like the 80s, which is not at all where the first Sad 13 record was coming from, but the lines between it being like a full band and just me got a little bit blurred, even though apart from our amazing drummer, Zoe Brecher, I was playing pretty much everything on that record. And then in the pandemic, everybody started to have to learn how to do all these different kinds of things. So a lot of the work I was getting offered was like, do a remix, do some background music for this, podcast, do some podcast theme songs, do a score for this thing. So I started to get deeper into learning how to mix and learning production things that I knew a little bit of, but I hadn't taken a recording class since the year 2007. So it was a bit of playing catch up. And now, I guess the distinction is just, I still pre-produce everything pretty fully for this Speedy record. When I sent everybody demos, it had drums and bass and a million guitars and keyboards and stuff on it. But it's a question of, do I want to rework this with my friends and figure out how to play this together and have that kind of component to it. So that's sort of the distinction. Do I want to be alone in my room till 4 a.m, adding, weird pitch tuned bells, or do I want to play a loud thing with my friends? And especially as some of the subject matter, as I was saying, was like returning to these early childhood traumas, I was thinking about what made me want to do music in the first place and how music was this escape from things that were tough to face. And so I was thinking a lot about the music that I loved when I first played guitar. And so I think some of the like heavier influences that first excited me about music, like a lot of new metal stuff. I loved Deftones. I loved Incubus.
Yeah.
That was like a big early influence on my guitar playing. That's not something I can make happen alone in the room. I can, but it's not the same thing. It's, about doing a band and doing a band with your friends. So we were all kind of thinking along those lines of like early formative musical loves and how to incorporate them into this record.
Yeah, there's something about the way you talk about music. I'm not a music expert at all. Like I'm obsessive about it, but the technical pieces or explaining it, I do struggle with it. But I heard you talk about Elliott Smith and favorite Elliott Smith song, and I'm just telling you, I was just fascinated. And I remember in your description and talking about the members of the band that I think it was a list of 10 Elliott Smith songs in each band member, and there was only Convergence on.
Oh gosh, yeah, I forgot. We did this a long time ago.
Yeah, but I adore Elliott Smith, and for me, listen to somebody talk about music, I understood everything, and it was exciting to listen to. And I haven't articulated, all that, but when somebody's talking about music and just I could understand when you're talking about like structurally how it was put together. It wasn't just driving me nuts. It was just like a way of understanding things that I don't have the ability to describe in general that occur in Elliott Smith's song. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because it was wonderful to listen to.
It's funny, like I wrote an essay for an anthology recently that's about food, and I was talking about how, as I have gotten more technically into production and music analysis, like I'm less mystified by it. So there's still like a huge appreciation and love and excitement, but I'm not having the thing where when I was 15 and putting on the headphones, I don't understand how a sound came to be, and so I'm obsessed with it because I don't know what it is. Now if I return and listen to things, I can kind of tell how they did it. So it adds a layer of like appreciation, but it also removes a layer of like mystification. And the gist of the essay was like, food is the mystifying thing, because I know how to cook. I'm not a bad cook, but I'm not like making whatever cilantro foam or whatever. I can't taste something and say, oh, the eggplant was done at this temperature for this amount of minutes. Whereas I can listen and be like, oh, I think it's this kind of delay, and I think this is the time that it's set to, and I think they panned it this way, and that's how it sounds, like the crazy overwhelming thing that so what has been fun is to return to especially in working on this project, I listened to a lot of music that I was obsessed with when I was 14, 15, and didn't understand how it was made, and kind of listened to it and was like, oh yeah, I think they did this. Let me try to make a drum machine that sounds like that. So that's been fun too. I do love trying to figure out how the sausage, this is the second time I've said this today, how the sausage gets made.
Well, the piece, I mean, in listening to being a big Elliott Smith fan and listening to his, I've always had this, it's like an investigation for me, because for me and whatever I understand, there's a what sounds like a simplicity to it. Yet, as I get into it or I hear somebody describe things being shifted and changed, I can gain an understanding of like what's occurring. And like, I need to have, like, I want to have a different understanding of what's going on and to be able to realize that. And that really helps. So anytime
I think
you want to talk
about, one of his real strengths is making something complicated sound simple. Sound.
It really does, though. It's not just like a throwaway phrase with, as you're saying, like with him, it really is this like magic or like deception of a veil or something, and then this is behind it, and it's just an attractive idea. So anytime you want to talk about Elliott Smith songs, your analysis of them, comparing them, open mic, something rather than nothing, anytime.
It's funny, there's a couple songs on this record. So when I first started tracking the demos, I'd written a lot of the songs. I use voice memos, and I always refer to them and try to cobble them together. So some of the voice memos are from like years and years and years ago, pre-pandemic, but it was like July of the year I started working on it that I was like, I'm going to sit down and listen to all the voice memos, figure out the chord progressions, piece these together, write some, first passes at lyrics, that most of which I'll throw away. And so there were a couple songs that I worked on and then I didn't return to it until December. So I spent July making a bunch of songs, and then in December I was like, let me one a day. I'll do pre-production, and my pre-production is pretty extensive, so it's got the drums and the bass and all the stuff. So there were a couple songs I did in July that kind of waltzy acoustic guitar songs, Elliott Smith, early Elliott Smithy to me. Which is not to say Elliott Smith didn't rock. Heat Miser rocks, and later stuff all has amazing, double drums and it's wild sounding. So I had these like kind of waltzy songs. Yeah. I was like, I've done a lot of like kind of Elliott Smith aping things in my time, including recording at New Monkey on the last Sad 13 record. I think I'm inspired right now. I was like, I love Mars Volta. I love At the Drive-In. I love all this like Texas post-hardcore stuff. So all the Elliott Smith like waltzy stuff became like a very different sound, which is fun to reflect on when we're playing them live. I'm like, oh yeah, this was like a little acoustic waltz, and now it's the most difficult riff I've ever had to play in my life.
I had the director of the Elliott Smith. I'm spacing out right now with regards to the name of the Elliott Smith documentary on. But it was.
Is it Heaven Adores You?
Yeah, Heaven Adores You. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Beautiful film, and just really loved that music. And what was interesting for me is I grew up out east, and I was in Wisconsin for about 12 years. So I got out here, and it was past the times like Elliott Smith and all that, but I had been a fan. And so it's always interesting to enter a territory and be around something, and be able to kind of get around and hear some of the lore around it, or to find like super big local fans who saw all his shows in Portland, in this area. It's been a real treat to have those conversations and get deeper into it. So I don't forget, Sadie, and this is going to be a bizarre question for you, but a necessary question.
Uh-oh.
But where do you want people to go to find your work? We get the new album coming out. What do you want people to see? Where do you want them to go?
Yeah, you could go to speedyortiz.com. Has all the necessary links to listen to whatever is out by the time this airs, and watch whatever videos are out by the time this airs. And that's where you get concert tickets too. That's kind of, yeah. And if you want to follow me on a social media thing, it's at Sad13, which is SAD13.
Thank you so much. If I could, studied poetry. I saw a lot of references to great poets in the back of your book, one which I adore, Morgan Parker. But
yeah, I love Morgan.
I love Morgan.
We did a reading
Parker
together on this book launch in LA, and I got to tell Morgan my book initially had some epigraphs to introduce the different sections, and the book initially opened with one from Morgan, and then I got scared about clearing all the quotations and just deleted them all at like the final edit. So it was cool to get to read together and to
I
point out that part.
As a poet, I get excited about and hope to have her on the show.
And I hadn't read her novel yet, but she sent me a copy, and I feel like I always try to save the books I'm most excited about for July, because that's my birthday, and I'm one of those. My whole month is my birthday, so I try to read the books in the queue that I'm most excited about in July. So that's when I'm gonna read Morgan's YA novel. I think it's YA.
Music in the queue.
YA-ish.
Music in the queue I'm excited about. That's another another thing to look for from you. Sadie, I just want to tell you, it's truly an honor and a pleasure to talk to you. And like I said, as I was prepping for this, I became concerned as a host, because I'm like, okay, this is my brain. This is what I'm interested in. This is what she's interested. So I got a little bit, but I just really appreciate you, talking about your music and talking about great art and sharing, honestly, and thank you for the important work that you do. Speaking up. I'll just say that straight up. I know, speaking up and saying what needs to be said is not an easy act. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Yeah, it's great talking to you. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Everybody, Sadie Dupuis, thank you so much.
I gotta swallow when it's in my face, rather than hawking out a spit take taste. Replace my predecessor overblown. No little bunny wears
is something rather than nothing.